Okay, let's talk grouping and aggregating data. So within the Transform tab of the query editor, you'll see this tool called Group By. Now, Group By allows you to aggregate or roll up your data at a different level than its current form. So a really common example of this is transforming something like daily data into weekly or monthly, or maybe you've got really granular transaction level data and you want to roll it up so that you have total transactions by store or by product type or product brand. Those are all examples of grouping or aggregating your data. Quick example here. I know it's a little bit tough to see, but let's say you've got data with multiple sales per product ID. You could use the group by options in the query editor to group those product IDs together. And the operation that you'd evaluate for those groups of product IDs is the sum of the quantity column. So in other words, we're transforming a daily transaction level table into a summary of quantity rolled up by product ID. And important note here, you will lose any field that you don't specify in these group by settings. So in this case that we're looking at right here, the output is going to look like this: a 2-column table with just our product IDs rolled up to unique values with the total quantity assigned to each. So think of it as compressing those rows and adding up the total quantity for any duplicate product IDs until you get to the point where you have a distinct count of product IDs and the associated quantities that go with them. So let's head to Excel and try grouping up some data on our own. Okay, for this demo, why don't we go ahead and open up a new CSV, and let's load up the Food Mart Transactions 1998 file. And you'll see it's got the same structure as 97, just with our 1998 dates. And go ahead and edit that table. And so what I want to do here is, first, I just want to see kind of what we're dealing with here. And the goal is to get a sense of, what kind of granularity we're dealing with. Obviously, we've got multiple rows of data per day, so this represents multiple transactions happening every day. One thing I can do is sort these product IDs ascending, which reveals that, okay, we've now got multiple product IDs per day as well. So this is a transaction level data set. Now, if I wanted to roll up this table, and instead of looking at it at this really granular in the weeds level, I wanted to just see like a summary table of the quantity sold by product ID, for instance, that's a perfect application for the group by tool. So it's in the Transform tab all the way here on the left. I can just hit group by, and all we're going to do here is group these product IDs together, and it's going to create a new column name with the aggregated values that are associated with it. So the new column name is actually going to be called, something like total quantity, since that's what we're going to be doing. The actual operation that we're evaluating here is the sum of the quantity rolled up for each product ID. So the new column that we're creating, think of it as just the sum of the quantity, so a name like total quantity makes perfect sense. Remember, we're going to lose any columns that aren't specified here, and when we press OK, it transforms this into a product ID level table. And let's just sort this again so that we can see what that looks like. Now we've got a unique row for each product ID where the rows have been collapsed and the quantity for each of those rows has been added or summed together. This is certainly an interesting tool, and it can be a helpful way to maybe explore your data or perhaps produce a variation of a data set at a different level. Personally, I don't use this too often because I prefer to pull in my data at the most granular level that I would possibly need, and then use tools like Power Pivot to segment and roll up and break down the data in a much more dynamic and flexible way. The problem with this is that you lose a lot of data by taking this route. So just word of warning, kind of use it cautiously and really only when you need it. Now let's just walk through one more quick example of this. We can just X out. That's the beauty of these applied steps. Just go all the way back to the point where we're still ungrouped now. So we've got our multiple rows per product ID back where we started. And maybe a more a more relevant example might be rolling up daily level data by month. So let's sort the transaction dates just so that it's a bit easier to interpret. And we can add a column, use that date field, and just create, whoops, accidentally added a year column. Let's undo that and go ahead and add a month column. That's better. Should be 1 through 12. There we go. Now let's just drag this over by the transaction date. And we're going to go into transform and let's do the group by again. And this time we're going to roll up by month and let's do the same operation here. Total quantity, which is the sum of the quantity column. And now we're using sums here. It's generally the most common approach, but keep in mind that you don't have to use sum. You could use the count rows or count distinct rows. In this case, the count rows would actually give us basically a sense of total transactions, where each unique row represented a transaction as opposed to a quantity of sales. You could also take just the minimum or the maximum. Doesn't really make much sense in this case, but there are other circumstances where it might. So just be aware that there are other operations besides a simple sum. So press OK, kind of know what to expect at this point. We should see a 12-row table returned. There we go, 1 row for each month with the aggregate total quantity per month. Again, kind of a cool tool, good for exploring this table, but we lost a lot of information by doing this, so I would hesitate to actually save this table in its new format. In fact, we're actually going to discard this whole query. We're going to load up this data in a slightly different way. So let's go ahead and X out of the query editor. We can discard these changes, and we're back to where we started from. So that was a quick demo on grouping and aggregating data with the query editor.